A haunted amusement park, a ghost-infested prison island, and a weathered castle harboring the restless spirits of those who passed within long ago await on this list of some of the most paranormally plagued places in California. Let's jump right in. Hey guys, and thanks for tuning in for this journey through some of the most haunted places in the Golden State of California. Recognized for its perfect weather, Spanish history, natural wonders, and beautiful beaches, California also harbors a long list of fascinating ghost stories, urban legends, and tales of encounters with the unknown. Are you sure you're ready for this? Our first haunt lands us just to the northeast of San Francisco in the Preston Castle. The Preston Castle, or officially the Preston School of Industry, which is located in Ione, California, is a looming fortress-like structure toting a fascinating history and numerous associated ghost stories and tales of supernatural activity. Historically, in 1890, 230 acres of land now holding the castle was purchased and donated for the purpose of housing a reform school known as the Preston School of Industry, which was geared toward rehabilitating rather than imprisoning wayward youth. Notably, bricks for the construction process were actually made in San Quentin and Folsom prisons, using sandstone that was quarried just out of Ione, and the establishment's cornerstone was laid on December 23rd of 1890. Plans for the building entailed a director's room, general offices, a walk-in vault, a reception room, a sitting room, a butler's pantry, a dining room, employee lavatories, a physician's office, a pharmacy, a clerk's office, and an annex complete with a dining room on its first floor, 12 apartments, a library and reading room, a schoolroom, a coat and hat room, and a men's and women's lavatories on its second floor, and a playroom, water closet, laundry, a lavatory, a hall, a kitchen, pantry, furnace, and fuel storage in the basement, while the site's third and fourth floors would remain unfinished. On June 13th of 1894, the site would welcome its first wards, though it wasn't officially opened until July 1st of the same year. And in 1895, electricity would be installed on site by way of a water wheel-powered dynamo called a Pelton wheel, which would support incandescent and arc lights. The Preston School of Industry would remain open until 1960 when more modern accommodations were completed, after which the site would sit vacant for a time, falling into disrepair, until July 30th of 1975 when it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and on September 10th of 2001, the Preston Castle Foundation would receive a 50-year lease for the property, after which it would set to work on preservation efforts and would even claim full ownership on November 7th of 2014. In more recent times, the Preston School of Industry has accommodated a number of film productions and remains open to the public and even offers touring options to those who might be interested. Chillingly, Preston Castle has long been surrounded by a slew of ghost stories and tales of otherworldly phenomena, and those braving its weathered grounds have reported phantom footsteps heard through empty hallways, extreme cold and hot patches felt in adverse weather, and encounters with shadowy figures that slink about, stalking the living at a distance. Several informal investigations of the expanse have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and orbs both captured in photography and visible to the naked eye, while first-hand accounts detail doors slamming spontaneously, objects that move on their own, disembodied voices, and even instances in which individuals are brushed up against or even pushed by someone or something unseen. Easily the most famous story surrounding the Preston School of Industry involves a convicted burglar by the name of Samuel Goines, who was booked on site through July of 1918. Within his first year of attendance, Goines would try to escape 3 times. However, during the third attempt, which fell in 1919, Sam, who was only 20 years old at the time, was fatally shot in the back by a guard named John Kelly. Tragically, his death transpired only 2 months before his release, after which he was buried unceremoniously in the on-site cemetery, which notably held the remains of 16 other young men, most of whom that had died to various illnesses like yellow fever or TB. To further add to the violence, in 1950, the site's head housekeeper, Anna Corbin, was beaten to death in the school's basement, and her killer was never discovered. Long-standing legends tell the spirits of all those who died before their time within Preston, and incidentally, the ghost of Anna has been sighted attending tasks from long ago, while the restless spirit of Sam has been viewed replaying his terrifying final moments, running desperately for a short distance before disappearing. And on to number 2, which lands us in the City of Angels at the infamous Cecil Hotel. The notorious Cecil Hotel, which is located in downtown Los Angeles, California, is a massively famous historic lodging that acts not only as an iconic symbol to the sprawling metro, but that's also recognized as one of the most terrifyingly haunted locations in the world due to its shocking array of associated high-profile ghost stories and real mysteries. Historically, through the 1920s, 3 prominent hoteliers, being William Banks Hanner, Charles L. Dix, and Robert H. Shops, would come together on the planning of a new hotel in the City of Angels. And in 1924, the Cecil was designed under Loy Lester Smith in the Beaux Arts style and constructed by W. Payton at a cost of $1.5 million. Notably, at its grand opening, it would cause quite a stir, boasting a uniquely opulent marble lobby complete with stained glass windows, potted palms, and alabaster statuary. The new lodging would grow quickly in popularity for a short time. However, rather unfortunately, within its first 5 years of operation, the Great Depression would hit hard, and profits would plummet. Although the site would welcome some good times through the 1940s, from the 50s and onward, its state would begin to decline rapidly once more, and the placement of the nearby area known as Skid Row would earn it a spotty reputation, with adjoining neighborhoods playing host to transients and high crime rates, and as many as 10,000 homeless individuals documented within a 4-mile radius. More recently, in 2008, new ownership would acquire the Cecil, and it would undergo a series of extensive renovations and refurbishments. In 2011, for a short time, the site was rebranded as Stay on Main, and in 2014, the establishment was purchased by one Richard Bourne for $30 million, after which he would offer a 99-year ground lease on the property to New York-based firm Simon Barron Development. In 2016, president of Simon Barron, one Matt Barron, would declare himself dedicated to the preservation of the prominent structure. Incidentally, in 2017, the hotel would close down for a time in order to welcome a mess of restorations, and in February of the same year, the Los Angeles City Council would vote the Cecil as a historic cultural monument, representative of early 20th century hotels everywhere. On December 13th of 2021, the site would reopen as an affordable housing complex operated under the Skid Row Housing Trust, and sadly, in April of 2022, the historic room rate advertisement on the southern facade, which had been there since 1927, was illegally whitewashed. The Cecil Hotel remains open as affordable housing into the present, though numerous reports have confirmed that a majority of its 600 rooms remain empty. And maybe there's a good reason for that beyond our deserved distrust of realtors attempting to profit off of multi-housing plots like the lords and ladies of old. Over its lengthy lifespan, this site has become exceedingly infamous for its dark history and long list of reported supernatural phenomena. And spanning back to its earliest days, both staff and guests have reported a host of disturbing and inexplicable activity within, including doors and windows that open and close on their own, disembodied footsteps emanating from empty hallways, and loud knocking and scratching noises and strange commotions heard from vacant rooms. One of the creepiest aspects of the Cecil is the ridiculously high rate of suicides that have occurred within, the first of which that would transpire in 1931, when guest W.K. Norton perished within his room after consuming poison capsules. Following the death of Norton, a host of hangings, self-inflicted gunshot wounds, and jumpers would be documented through the 1940s and 50s. And in 2008, 2 longtime residents would actually refer to the old building as the Suicide, a nickname that's become rather popular since. Incidentally, the full-bodied apparitions of various victims of suicide have been sighted throughout the hotel and within their respective rooms, often replaying their final moments and sometimes bearing grievous wounds or displaying grotesque conditions. To date, a massive number of paranormal investigations of the hotel, both high-profile and informal, have been conducted, and have yielded chilling EVPs, orbs captured in photography and video, strange EMF fluctuations, and hits on thermal grids, communicative devices, and pretty much every other piece of equipment familiar to the field, while others have reported instances of objects moving around on their own, accounts of areas changing or of the discovering of rooms that shouldn't exist, and eerie tales of the elevator acting of its own accord. or taking writers to a mysterious floor that seems frozen in time, where apparitions roam freely, and where it lingers for moments before the doors shut and reopen to normal floors. Another perturbing account details the residency of Pigeon Goldie Osgood, a well-known and respected former telephone operator who was a long-term resident of the Cecil. Tragically, in 1964, the body of Pigeon was found within her room, having been brutally assaulted and stabbed to death, and her restless spirit has been sighted lurking around the property, often bearing her death marks. Interestingly enough, while one suspect was initially tried in her slaying, he was later absolved, and this crime remains unsolved, which many believe is the reason for her soul's unrest. As an interesting bit of side trivia, through the 1980s, notorious serial killer Richard Ramirez, or the Night Stalker, stayed at the Cecil for a bulk of his killing spree, where he would strip off his bloody clothing in the alleyways and make his way up the stairs to his room in blood-soaked underwear. Ironically, he was also captured right outside of the hotel in 1985, after which he was sentenced to death and would eventually die in prison in 2013 from cancer. Subsequently, serial killer Austrian Jack Unterweger would also stay at the Cecil in 1991, and while on site, would strangle and kill at least 3 working girls, all crimes which he was tried for and charged with later in Austria. The spirits of both men have been sighted roaming the property covered in blood, as have the entities of several of their victims, and many have reported hearing blood-curdling screams piercing the air. Finally, possibly the most famous story surrounding this weathered lodging ties itself to the 2013 death of Canadian student Elisa Lam. Intriguingly, Lam's final moments were actually captured on hotel surveillance cameras. The footage, which has since gone viral, depicts Elisa in the hotel's elevator pressing buttons frantically as she seemingly hides from and even talks to a presence unseen. And after a lengthy search, her body was later discovered within a water cistern atop the building, after guests began reporting low pressure and odd-tasting water. While her death was eventually ruled an accidental drowning, many maintain her demise was due to supernatural causes, and have even spurred local legends that the hotel itself is evil, and has a way of warping the minds of those who stay within. Our third haunt takes us to the most magical place on Earth, to the iconic Disneyland. Disneyland, which really needs no introduction, is a magically themed amusement park placed out of Anaheim, California, that pretty much sets the bar for all other theme parks like it, and that actually ties itself to a surprising range of purported supernatural activity. Historically, through his early life, the legendary and rather prestigious creator of Disney Studios, Walt Disney, who was born in 1901 in Chicago, and who would later move to California, would take multiple trips to Griffith Park in Los Angeles, where, while watching a merry-go-round, he would slowly form the planning of a park that both adults and their children could enjoy. And while he would initially hold off on acting on these visions, they would fester until the creative genius simply couldn't contain them any longer. On August 31st of 1948, studio production designer Dick Kelsey would receive some of the earliest drafts for the future Disneyland, which at the time was referred to as Mickey Mouse Park, and which were written up during Walt's trip with Ward Kimball to the Chicago Railroad Fair and Henry Ford's Museum in Greenfield Village, which in turn boasted attractions such as Main Street and steamboat rides. After some careful consideration, Disney would deem a full-on studio experience a bit mundane for visitors, and would opt instead for a play park complete with boats, rides, and various themed areas, which, with the help of his staff, he would immediately set to work in designing. Unfortunately, Walt lacked the funding to see his dreams through to completion, and after further consideration, he would start his journey with the creation of a new show called Disneyland, which was broadcast on the only then just budding ABC, and in return, the network would help with his monetary needs. On July 17th of 1955, a completed, albeit early Disneyland was dedicated in an international press release that saw an attendance of around 28,000 people, nearly half of which held counterfeit tickets or had simply jumped the fence. And the following day, it would officially open to the public, offering a total of 20 instantly cherished attractions. Through the rest of the 1950s and 60s, Disneyland would grow wildly in popularity, accommodating a number of famous guests, including the Shah of Iran and Empress Farah. And while through the early 60s there was some concern regarding Disneyland's lack of African-American employees, despite stereotypes raised by today's pop culture, comedy skits, and social media, the park actually always boasted employees of all races, and unlike every other park of its time, was completely unsegregated. In 1972, 1952, Bear Country was established while the Main Street Electrical Parade was introduced. In 1975, construction of Space Mountain was started, and in 1977, the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad would replace the earlier mine train through Nature's Wonderland. In 1982 and 83 respectively, the old Fantasyland would close down and a new Fantasyland would be opened in its stead. Through the 1990s, the park, associated hotels, and the original parking lot were merged into the Disneyland Resort, and in 2001, Disneyland's California Adventure would open its gates, while Disneyland itself would see the introduction of Downtown Disney, of Disney's Grand California Hotel and Spa, a remodeled hotel, and the rebranding of the Pan Pacific Hotel into Disney's Paradise Pier. In 2004, the park would welcome renovations to Space Mountain, to the Jungle Cruise, to the Haunted Mansion, to Pirates of the Caribbean, and to the Tiki Room. In 2010, and rather heartwarmingly, the Give a Day, Get a Disney Day would encourage any interested in serving local charities in exchange for free day passes. And in 2015, the site would celebrate its 60th Diamond Celebration anniversary, and would introduce the Paint the Night Parade, the Disneyland Forever Fireworks Show, and diamond decorations with a large 60 being added to the Sleeping Beauty Castle. More recently, in January of 2023, Disneyland would introduce Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, as well as the Wondrous Journeys Fireworks Show. Disneyland remains open into the present, offering a ton of events while accommodating tens of millions of visitors per year. And while it does tote the title of being the happiest place on Earth, it may surprise you to learn that it's also considered one of California's most haunted. Incidentally, in the basement of Mickey's house in Toontown, many have reported objects moving around, trash cans tipping over suddenly, and names being called out from thin air. In Space Mountain, a large spectral man with red hair has been sighted boarding and riding the ride, but is always gone by the time it's over. And a ghostly little girl has been sighted all across California Adventure, and usually frequents either the front gate, various stores, or the locker rooms, where she's been known to move objects around and play small pranks on the living. The spirit of a teenager who was killed in 1966 after hopping the fence and getting hit by the monorail train has been known to sprint along its tracks. The entity of a teen who was killed in 1967 on the People Mover ride, which was decommissioned in 1995, has been known to pull the hair of pretty blondes who visit Tomorrowland. And following an incident in 1973 when two brothers stayed past close on Tom Sawyer's Island, and after the older brother drowned when they attempted to swim across the River of America, the apparition of said boy has been observed splashing around in the current, calling for help for moments before disappearing beneath the wake. Additionally, a woman in white has been spotted floating eerily down Main Street, and in 1984, and rather disturbingly, a female parkgoer was killed on the Matterhorn when she was thrown from a car at a particularly harsh downslope. Ever since, her voice has been heard calling out to staff right near the place of her passing, which has ominously been dubbed Dolly's Dip. Ironically, one of the most paranormally charged places at Disneyland is actually its Haunted Mansion. Predating the ride itself, in 1940, a fatal plane crash would occur right where the mansion now sits. And ever since, the spirit of its pilot, clad in a suit and holding a walking cane, has been sighted near. Disturbingly, the practice of people dumping their loved ones' ashes around the mansion is frightfully real, and additional reports detail the full-bodied apparitions of various individuals in clothing spanning the ages all throughout the ride, most prominent of which might be the ghost of a crying little boy who is usually encountered right near the exit. One particularly eerie fable surrounding the mansion tells that in 1963, and during a test ride, a woman actually died within from a heart attack, resulting in its closure until 1969. Incidentally, an ethereal woman matching her description has been sighted, and many claim it belongs to the ill-fated writer who was not yet ready to leave our world. Lastly, during his life, Walt Disney himself maintained an apartment right above the fire station on Main Street. As a tribute to the park's creator, a light within the apartment is always left on, though the reason behind this ritual may shock you. As it's told, an employee in charge of that area long ago reported turning the light off only to find it on again moments later, and eventually heard the voice of Disney himself emanating from thin air, saying calmly and soothingly, "I'm still here." This age-old ghost story set the foundation for the well-known tradition, and the full-bodied apparition of Walt has been sighted often throughout the area, and all along Main Street for that matter, some say, as he forever watches over his beloved creation. And on to number 4, which lands us just off the coast of San Diego at Hotel del Coronado. Hotel del Coronado, which is also known as the Del or Hotel Del, and that's located on Coronado Island in Southern California, is a sweepingly massive historic resort designed in wooden Victorian style that boasts the title of being the second largest wooden structure in the US just after the Tillamook Air Museum in Oregon, and its bounds are shrouded in a host of scary stories and local legends. Historically, through the 1880s, San Diego would experience one of its first true real estate booms. In 1885, a group of 5 investors headed by railroad magnate E.S. Babcock and Hampton L. Story of the Story and Clark Piano Company would purchase Coronado and North Island, and in April of 1886, they would establish the Coronado Beach Company, which would dip its fingers into local water, ferry, and rail profits. In March of 1887, construction of the hotel would start atop what was documented as a sand pit populated by jackrabbits and coyotes. In February of 1888, the finished construct would hold a grand opening during which thousands would travel across the bay to attend. And in 1890, the establishment was fully purchased by partial financier John D. Spreckles and family. Notably, the Del boasted a number of amenities that made it quite luxurious and unique for its time, being an Olympic-sized saltwater pool, full tennis courts, a yacht club, a Japanese tea garden, an ostrich farm, billiards, bowling alleys, and options for both deep-sea fishing and hunting expeditions. Through its earlier years, the monstrous hotel would build a reputation as a place of refined class, and through the 1920s and 30s, it would host a slew of notable names, including Edward, Prince of Wales, his future wife Wallis Simpson, Douglas Fairbanks, Charlie Chaplin, Rudolph Valentino, Clark Gable, Errol Flynn, Mae West, Joan Crawford, Katharine Hepburn, Bette Davis, and Ginger Roger. Likewise, the site has also accommodated various US presidents including Harrison, McKinley, Taft, and Wilson, and was especially popular through the Great Depression when, on New Year's Day of 1937, the gambling ship the SS Monte Carlo actually shipwrecked around a quarter of a mile down the shoreline. Through World War II, a number of US hotels were utilized by the military for board and as hospital sites, and Hotel Del was no exception. During this time, it would host pilots training at the nearby North Island Naval Air Station, and was never actually fully commandeered due to the fact that it was also heavily used by their families. Following the war, Spreckles would sell the site to one Barney Goodman. By the late 1950s, the establishment had begun to show its age, and the Del would be sold once again to local millionaire John Alessio, who would set to work on restorations, refurbishments, and several additions including a grand ballroom, a Victorian lounge, and a matching Victorian elevator grill. In 1963, the hotel was sold to one M. Larry Lawrence, who would invest $150 million into further refurbs and upgrades. And following his death in 1996, the expanse would be sold to the Travelers Group, who would complete a $55 million upgrade in 2001. More recently, in 2003, Hotel del Coronado was sold to CNL Hospitality Properties Inc. and KSL Recreation Corp., after which it was governed by various shareholders, and in 2014, Strategic Hotels and Resorts would become full owners, though in December of 2015, Blackstone Group LP would purchase Strategic as a company. In August of 2017, Hilton Hotels and Resorts would take over management of the Del. In 2018, it was listed amongst the Historic Hotels of America. In 2019, the site would see numerous upgrades and expansions, and in 2021, the historic main lobby, front facade, and front veranda would all welcome full restorations. In 2022, the hotel would open an entirely new wing, and in as recently as January of this year, being 2024, the main wing would close for a $160 million renovation that's spec'd to take around a year for completion. In the present, Hotel del Coronado remains open to guests and to the public, and stands as a cherished gem in the San Diego region. Chillingly, all throughout the Del, both guests and staff members have recounted run-ins with a host of otherworldly phenomena, including extreme cold patches felt through the normally balmy SoCal weather, instances of doors and windows opening and closing on their own, and accounts of guests returning to locked rooms or awaking in the mornings to find appliances or faucets and showers turned on inexplicably. One of the most haunted rooms on site is said to be that of the former Room 502, which was later labeled as Room 3502, and that now stands as Room 3519, that originally housed hotel staff, and within, many who have just arrived on site have turned for only moments to find their bags unpacked, and their clothing either folded or hung, while conversely, those who are readying themselves for departure have discovered all of their belongings packed neatly in their bags by the door. Additionally, several have documented the feeling that they are not alone within the room, and a handful of visitors have been awakened in the middle of the night to find ghostly figures at the feet of their beds. A handful of investigations of the Dell have yielded strange EVPs captured in audio and video recordings, odd EMF fluctuations, and hits on communicative devices, while other reports entail the sighting of guests in old-timey attire that are there one moment and gone the next, or with spectral staff members such as bellhops that seemingly attend tasks from their lives long since past. Easily the most famous ghost story surrounding Hotel del Coronado tells of one Kate Morgan. In November of 1892, Kate would check into the resort under the alias of Lottie A. Bernard, with only one suitcase and traveling alone. During her first day at the hotel, Kate would befriend a bellboy who would later state that she claimed to have been traveling with her brother and that she seemed to be in rather poor health. Through her second day on site, Kate would inform the manager that she wasn't really traveling alone, that she was really traveling with her brother, and inquired numerous times as to whether he'd checked in or not. On the third day, she would purchase medicine for stomach pains and informed pharmacists that her brother was a doctor and would be joining her soon. And on the fourth day, she barely left her room. On Kate's fifth and final day at the hotel, she would ride into town to purchase a pistol as what she claimed was a gift. However, after returning to the hotel and when there was no news of her brother, Kate would hurry back upstairs and would take her own life by way of self-inflicted gunshot wound right on the stair that led to the beach. Following her passing, speculations were flung left and right. Some told that Kate was murdered, while others that she and her husband scammed people out of their money by acting like siblings, and that him leaving her while pregnant was actually the cause of her ending it all. But the truth was far darker. As it was eventually revealed, Kate was actually married to Tom Morgan and hailed from Iowa. Following the loss of a brand new infant child, Kate had had a breakdown and had left town with Tom's stepbrother, who it's assumed after a fight abandoned her on the train ride in. Chillingly, Kate's presence has been cited throughout the hotel, always seemingly in a fluster, where she's been known to knock items off of shelves, steal personal effects, and cause all sorts of mischief. Most commonly, the spirit of Kate is encountered in her former room, room 302, which was later numbered as 3312, and now that stands as room 3327, where she's been known to appear suddenly to guests in the middle of the night, causing a terrible panic. Last but not least, get ready to get booked at the notorious Alcatraz prison. Located in the San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Prison, or The Rock, which is placed on Alcatraz Island in California, is a notorious 19th century lockup famous for its holding of various high-profile criminals that, in recent times, has grown in infamy for an impressive range of purported hauntings. Historically, in 1775, the first Europeans to lay eyes on the islands of the San Francisco Bay consisted of Spanish naval officer and explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala and his crew, who charted the region through the Spanish rule of California, and who named this particular island as La Isla de los Alcatraces, which translates in English to the island of the Gannettes. Notably, it's now believed that this was actually intended to mean the island of the Pelicans, as gannettes are not found along the Pacific coast. Over the years, the Spanish version of Alcatraz took over in popularity, and in 1827, it was documented as such when French captain Auguste Bernard de Haut-Silly wrote of sailing past the spit and firing a gun over a gathering of California brown pelicans, which he described as flying into the air and creating a monstrous noise akin to a hurricane. In 1846, Alcatraz Island was given to one Julian Workman by Mexican Governor Pio Pico, under the stipulation that Workman construct a lighthouse on site, though later the same year, military governor of California John C. Fremont would purchase the island for $5,000 in the name of the US government, and in 1850, President Fillmore would order it be set aside for a military reservation. In 1853, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers would begin fortifying Alcatraz, and through the Civil War, the island would mount up to 105 cannons. In as early as 1859, the military would begin holding soldiers convicted of crimes on site. By 1861, the Rock had been re-established as a military prison, and starting in 1863, the lockup would be used to hold inmates that were private citizens as well. Following the war, in 1867, a brick jailhouse was constructed. By 1898, and due to the Spanish-American War, inmate numbers would rise from 26 to over 450. And following the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, civilian prisoners from other jails affected by the catastrophe were transferred from their respective sites to Alcatraz. In 1909, construction was started on a massive central cell block. In October of 1933, the U.S. disciplinary barracks was deactivated, and in 1935, 1934, the island was designated a federal prison and was officialized to hold inmates that had been causing trouble in other facilities, with its first batch of 137 prisoners arriving by railroad later the same year. Through its 29 years of use for this purpose, the Rock would hold some of America's most infamous, including the likes of Al Capone, Robert Franklin Stroud or the Birdman, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Bumpy Johnson, as well as a host of political terrorists. Contrary to popular myth, it was actually quite possible to escape Alcatraz by way of swimming to shore. However, all such attempts were thwarted, and in 1946, one such attempt would actually result in the Battle of Alcatraz, in which a fight between inmates and officers resulted in numerous casualties. In 1963, due to increased costs, erosion, and ineffective policing methods, Alcatraz would be shut down as a penitentiary, with its remaining inmates being transferred to other facilities. And only a year later, the island would be commandeered for an ensuing 2 years by the United Indians of all tribes, which mostly consisted of college students protesting federal policies related to native tribes and their lands. In 1972, the National Park Service would acquire Alcatraz and would link it with the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. In 1976, the expanse would be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In 1986, it was designated a National Historic Landmark, and in 1993, the NPS would publish a plan to double areas of the lockup accessible to the public. Alcatraz remains open into the present and offers tours of its facilities with emphasis on the quality of prison life during operation, as well as on the histories of various high-profile prisoners and officers. Not really all that surprisingly, when considering its history of violent offenders and squandered lives, the whole of Alcatraz Island is believed to host a slew of ghostly presences, and those braving its grounds have reported an assortment of inexplicable encounters. But reports of supernatural activity across its bounds is not a new thing, and stories of the island's power actually began with tribes native to the area, who believed for hundreds or even thousands of years that it was infested by evil spirits. These beliefs were so concrete, in fact, that they would punish those who had committed crimes to time on the island, or even a complete exile, from which many were either later discovered deceased or never seen again. In the prison's earliest days, both guards and military personnel would report terrifying encounters with an evil spirit that emitted horrifying moans and sobbing sounds, an awful stench, and that sometimes manifested as a dark mass with glowing eyes that they dubbed very simply as the Thing. Interestingly enough, the prison's first warden, one James A. Johnson, often scoffed at tales of this entity. However, even he documented that at one point, while leading a group on a tour of the facility, everyone present heard the commotion of a woman sobbing from an area known as the dungeon, which was empty at the time, and as soon as the sobbing stopped, a cold breeze, which was felt by all, shot through the area. Additionally, other guards would talk of run-ins with a man in a gray suit, brimmed hat, and with mutton chops, who would appear in front of them for moments before fading away, as well as instances of phantom cannon and gunfire and screams that would send all but the bravest running in terror. Some notable cells on site include that of the famous Birdman of Alcatraz, where to this day, birds have been known to gather, and the B-block cell of the iconic Al Capone, where small pranks are often played on the living, and where the sounds of banjo music, which Capone loved to play in life, are often heard. Subsequently, Capone's banjo strains have also been detected from the shower area, where it's believed he would joke with and entertain his fellow inmates in order to pass the time. In C-Block, the utility tunnels are believed to harbor the spirits of Bernard Coy, Joseph Kretzner, and Marvin Hubbard, who were all killed in a 1946 escape attempt and whose apparitions are often sighted through the darkness. The laundry room is believed to hold an unseen presence that has been known to throw things around dangerously, and in the old hospital ward, several have told of disembodied voices and even screams. By far the most haunted area on Alcatraz is believed to be that of D-Block, which is made up of 42 cells that all tote various levels of restrictions, and those braving its bounds have reported objects sighted moving around on their own, extreme cold patches, and phantom footsteps and voices. The last few cells within D are known as the Hole, and offered some of the strictest solitary confinement conditions that one could possibly imagine. From within the hole, several have told of hearing tortured screams, banging, and scratching sounds. Terrifyingly, it's documented that one prisoner kept within the hole began screaming every night and pleading with the guards that he was being attacked after sundown by a ghostly prisoner with glowing eyes. The guards in turn would laugh at these claims until one day his screaming stopped, and his lifeless body was later discovered with strangle marks across its neck. Days later, during a convict count, guards would tally one more prisoner than there should have been. Slowly, everyone would turn to find that amidst the group was the full-bodied apparition of the strangled man, hand marks and all, who lingered for a second before fading away. Today, cells D12 and D14 are considered amongst the block's most haunted areas, and the latter is often described as sitting at nearly 20 degrees colder than the surrounding area. Lastly, on foggy nights, which are actually pretty common on Alcatraz, the phantom image of the island's old lighthouse has been known to materialize for moments, before fading away in a flash. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of some of California's most haunted places. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, like this upload, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good scare. I'll see you all next time.